Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. TRG 30, where we're talking every week, gathering around the notion of resilience, creative resilience for our sector. And today, we're going to be talking about replicable plans for opening and reopening that listen to and serve the community every step of the way with our guest, Jon Gilchrist, who's the Executive Director and Deputy Chief Exec of HOME, the dynamic multidisciplinary arts center in dynamic Manchester, England. I'm going to come back to Jon and HOME in a second, but first, as always, I want to cue you up to listen for three things. Additions. Are there pieces here in what you hear from Jon that you might be able to incorporate into your own reopening strategies? Second is about listening and your own patron relationship listening. Is it two-way right now, or are you broadcasting and pushing out only? And finally, replicability and nimbleness. The pandemic is going to require both of us. Are your plans built so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel at every turn? So now I want to turn to Jon. Jon Gilchrist, welcome today. I'm so pleased to be with you. And before
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Welcome to you and to TRG 30. So before we get started talking about the specific plans, let's just first orient our listeners today about the business model in Manchester. So just talk first about the business model of HOME.
So we are a multi-arts venue in Greater Manchester, which is the second largest city, well, the second biggest city. Birmingham might claim it, but it is Manchester in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. It's a population of about 500,000, and in the wider region, Greater Manchester is about 2.8 million. So it's a big city. It's landlocked. So we've got an audience which is significant within an hour's drive time of us. And us as an organisation, we opened in 2015, and we were the amalgamation of the Library Theatre and Corner House. Corner House was a much-loved visual art and cinema venue, and the Library Theatre, which Stephen knows and used to work at, it was a theatre which was based in the old library of the town hall. And when they came together, no one was sure whether the model would work, because we're effectively merging together two institutions for the city. And putting it on what was just an old gasworks. But what was remarkable is they came in their droves. And HOME, as a result, has led to economic regeneration in a part of the city that wasn't there before. So, you know, I can't claim I've only been here like 2.5 years, but it's been a huge success.
Well, it's
Manchester is a city, just a bit more context.
Yep, please.
So it is a working class city, but it's the home of a lot of political activism, so socialism, the cooperative movement, and it's got one of the biggest LGBTQ plus communities in the country. So I mean, it's a diverse city with over 200 languages spoken, and our job is to try and reflect it across cinemas, theatres and galleries.
Yeah, so I was there, have been there more than once, but the venue itself is
yes.
Electric and dynamic. The city feels that way. You do see and hear and feel this energy. And HOME is situated right in the middle of all of it. Okay, so boy, our timing for this date that we have together is momentous. Lots of things happening here in the States for sure, but since we spoke and prepared for this day, the PM announced a lockdown in England. Makes our conversation really timely. Back when we prepared, you let me know. You helped me see your 3-phase plan for reopening, which you've got you built in so that you could be nimble and anticipate. So let's just start by walking through those 3 phases, their names and their intentions.
So 3 phases were, well, the first one was when we locked down in March, we knew we needed to basically take the operation and deliver as much as we could online. And that was HOME from Home. HOME is a great organisation to pun on, so we do that quite a lot. So HOME from Home is basically where we looked at what the values of the organisation were and what was needed in the communities that we're in. So I think what's sort of interesting is that people across the country have done different things, and some repurposed their buildings, schools, courts, hospitals even. Some went to fulfill their civic duty through delivering food for local communities and actually servicing in incredibly brilliant and significant ways. But we believed in a city of our size, and our responsibility and our expertise was to the audiences that we had to provide something cultural to them, and to the artistic community of the city to continue to deliver work. So the first stage, which is Home from Home, we set up a program which could be delivered online. So we built partnerships for the film. So with film, it was with people like Mubi, and which is an online platform, and BFI Player. And we've also got a artist film distribution company called Home Artist Film. And we put out a film which was Andrew Cotting's Whalebone Box. So we ensured that we still distributing film. With visual art, we did an online graphic novel, which is called Our Plague Year by Nick Burton, which people could subscribe to and get delivered into their inbox every week, sorry. 52 of them have now been commissioned, one for every week of the year. And then the most significant thing was something called Homemakers, which was for theatre makers and live art. I'm just going to find my notes for the exact statistics, but live art makers, where we paid commissions, and we did 27 homemakers commissions, which were basically anything from live performance, games, letters, where we allowed the artist to be able to play and continue to provide for audiences. So that was a really, really exciting project, and around 25,000 people around the world got to experience them. And frankly, it probably got us more critical response than we'd had to our program in a long while. So it was really great.
So you were actually commissioning the artists to participate in this way during this Home from Home phase.
Yeah, so I think one of the pieces of feedback, when I go on to phase two, I'll talk a little bit more about that loop. But was that during this period, there was a lot of idea that what we need to do is bail out the artists. And the freelance artists need this emergency support. And what they actually needed was work. They needed opportunity. They're not a charity. They're skilled professionals. And we fundamentally believed it was important during that period to provide them work. And Jude Christian, who's our associate artist, who's incredible, basically got this scheme up and running probably within 2 days.
Wow.
And we got them out, and we were one of the first online. And it's messy. It's not always perfect, but it's been really special.
Okay, so that's Home from Home.
That's Home from Home. So phase two it's probably the one I found most interesting. So this is more about consultation and programming of the venue that you're going into. So we basically knew we announced when we were going to reopen. So within the UK, there were different things could open at different times, and live performance was always going to be the last to open because of rehearsals and proximity of audiences. But cinemas could open on the 4th of July, and we made the decision that we weren't going to open then. We were going to open on the 4th of September and use basically the 2 months we had to learn as much as we could about audiences. So we did that through a number of different ways. I mean, I say audiences. One of the things that was, I think, most important to this process is that I was sitting on a Zoom call with lots of artists, and they were talking about what was important. And I'd also had a Zoom call with audience as well. And I was speaking to our staff and our volunteers, and they were all talking about what home meant to them and what it was as an organization. And I'm not sure if the analogy of the blind man and the elephant, where one touches the elephant and they feel it's like a hose, and they're touching the trunk. One touches and think it's a rope. And I think what was happening is, as a group of people, their perceptions of what reopening should all be about was incredibly different, and what the purpose of the organization was. So we did audience research through a survey, which was part of this national survey after the interval, which taught us quite a lot. But we set up something called the Home Soon panel. And the Home Soon panel featured representatives from our audience. So that is everyone from somebody who comes to theatre, visual art and cinema every week, loves it, couldn't survive without us, all the way through to somebody who just comes and has cake and steals our Wi-Fi, and wanted to see that as equally important. But within that, we also had a nominee from the volunteer force, a nominee from the staff, 2 artists, one of whom represents, or 3 artists, sorry, one of whom represents Triple C, which is a disability arts charity in the city. Darren Pritchard, who was a freelancer task force member, and Frankie Blouse, who's a member of Young Identity, which is a young people's spoken word collective. And we effectively put them all in a Zoom room together. And Eileen, who was our volunteer, who is, I'm not going to say her age, but she's isolating in Gloucester, and she doesn't think she will ever come back to home until the pandemic's over, and it feels safe again, all the way through to people who will feel comfortable coming in the next day.
Right.
And them talking to each other and interacting with each other with the generosity and the spirit that they had, that was where the magic happened. And it came from, I read this book, basically basic book, I cannot remember the title of it, about cognitive diversity and the importance of having that in the room. And I think during a pandemic, sometimes you move too quickly and you forget the importance of clashing those ideals. And that led to some of the best ideas that we had, frankly.
Yeah, from your lips, bringing diverse perspectives and backgrounds together to have them clash together creates creative resiliency. Okay, so you do this and you learn a lot from it, and that informs your phase 2 home soon. What happened?
Well, so the home soon was then about, I'm not going to go into the safety details, but it was things like we did a series of different workshops with them, one which might be basically taking them the route through the building. And from that, you will have somebody who just says the height of that particular sanitation stand is not right for people in a wheelchair, or having somebody with a mask there rather than a visor there, that's going to cause problems. It's the kind of things that would be blindingly obvious. Right. But also, once we put the seating in place, it was how comfortable people feel going into the space. And we also did things like ask them what the things that were most important to them during the pandemic, because what we knew is that the moment we went in, the world had changed fundamentally to the time we were coming back. So the gap between rich and poor, extended, if anything. So accessibility would become important. The murder of George Floyd and the subsequent rise of Black Lives Matter in this country was felt very much in our city. And that was something that was obviously always there, but it was really, really crystallized during this period, and we needed to make sure that these concerns were echoed in a program. And so we didn't rush into the program.
So lots of learning, dialogue, blind spot lifting, and the public message, like on the building. We showed the image of your building. It said, "Welcome home." At that time, did it say home soon? What was the public message? We're opening in September. You can come home soon.
Yes. Okay. So we made a clear picture about when we were reopening, and we basically built a campaign around home soon. So that was very much about openly saying to people, we want to hear from you. The next phase, which was the welcome home phase, is the one which basically builds on the work that you've done to date. So you don't forget about what happened in the home from home period, because we know that at any point we could be back in a closure period. So all of the work there, that stays. Then we were able to take all the information that we learned in the home soon period, which was where we were saying to audiences constantly, we want to talk to you. And then you move into phase 3, which was welcome home.
And welcome
home was the most exciting one.
Right.
So what that was as much about a campaign where we work across the city to say, what are the things that people most want in a venue now? They want it to be fake. They want it to feel safe. They want it to feel familiar. And there was this idea of it needs to feel safe without feeling sanitized. And the brand needed to encompass that. So at the heart of that was a lot of digital assets. One of the most critical ones being Darren Pritchard, who was one of our home soon panel. When we were talking through, with the marketing director was talking through what the idea was for a video, Darren literally just said, "Oh, I could do a Vogue through."
It was so fabulous, this video. It was so creative. And you just have to say a little thumbnail about Daryl for our listeners who won't know him. He's just fabulous.
Darren is Manchester's Vogue house mother. So he runs House of Ghetto. And he's also an incredible artist and someone we work with. And if we hadn't had that meeting and we hadn't had those conversations, then that never would have been suggested, and it wouldn't have led to that happening, because we took the marketing team, put them together with artists, and the idea, and it was just universally, I think we've had over, I think it's like 120,000 views of that video now, which is probably our most distributed work of art we've ever done, which is probably disappointing.
Stylish as Darren. He's just, it was so great.
Yeah, so that was so what we were able to do is sort of retain the brand, but also not accentuate the fact the thing that made home the best was when it was uncomfortably busy. So usually we play on the fact this is a place for people. We had to move away from that. And when we did the reopening, for instance, we didn't publicize openly what was going to happen, but we had a band called Mr. Wilson's Frontliners would play in just 2 people who attended, just a marching band around the square. And that provided video content that made people go, wow, home's open. And that very night we had a DJ called Mr. Scruff, who's a major Manchester DJ, did a secret DJ set. Mm-hmm. And throughout the period, we didn't promote these big activities, but whenever we put something like that on, we post them in social to create a sense of, if I go to home, something might happen. Mm-hmm. So you're creating serendipity, you're creating the sort of joy, but what you're not doing is bringing massive bottlenecks of people in at the same time.
Right.
And so you're able to keep that cool. Yeah. Yeah. You keep the cool, but.
Yeah, right. So it's cool. The art and the artists are cool, but because it's pop-up, people don't know to queue and be there. So it all sort of worked to create the dynamic impression you wanted without the crowds that reinforces the safety that you're trying to also to do.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've learned a lot about how you've listened on a two-way basis. We hear about the nimbleness. We have home from home and then home soon and welcome home. And now you are pivoting back to like what is happening today right now? And what are you learning as you have to go, as you're actually doing the pivot?
So when we programmed this theatre program that we've done, we built into the contract that in the event that we can distribute them online, the artists retain the guarantees, but we distribute and we do it digitally. Mm-hmm. So what we were able to do is the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport announced at 10:30 on Monday, 10:30 p.m. on Monday, that you're allowed to live broadcast from venues, even though the venues were closed. And by 11 o'clock that night, we've got a press release out saying all of our shows will happen online. It was totally ready. And the way we saw it is that initially we were talking about the idea of being able to pivot to digital. And the fact that you take the live and then all of a sudden you pivot back to digital. But we come to realize it was actually more like, I'm not an aviation expert, so this is probably a bad analogy, but it's more like having 2 engines on a plane. Is that we knew that there was a chance that one would cut out. Mm-hmm. So we had homemakers and we had the digital performance content, which was there to go. It's not like this one only starts working when this one fails. It's like they're both going. But in the event that all of a sudden you've got to go back to phase 1, which we are, and if you look at our social media tomorrow, you will see it will be called Home from Home brackets again. Uh-huh. And I think part of the whole ethos is that we've not only done the stages in our head, we've been entirely explicit along the way to audience. We are now in this stage. Right. So then once we do it, we'll be into the next stage.
What does the building say right now? What is the building?
The building says welcome home. We'll need to take the vinyl down. Okay. Which we'll leave to the marketing team.
Will you go back to, I see Stephen, thank you. You're going to take the mic here, but will you go back to home soon, meaning to conversations again? Is there a plan to do that again?
Yeah, there is. I think the difference is this time that period might be shorter. The way I sort of see it is it's a virtuous circle. So every single time we go back to phase 1, we don't forget what we've already learned. So as we continue to loop through, so we might get a third or fourth wave, all the things we learned there, we will add to them, not delete them. So we'll go back to home soon. Whether we're as public about it or not, we're still yet to be decided.
Yeah, okay. Stephen.
John, you're making me miss Manchester. Questions, please do submit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I wonder, as I listened to you, John, it sounds, and I'm sure it wasn't so easy. I wonder what the hurdles or even resistance along the way that you would share with everyone.
I think hurdles is the fact that a lot of the time you're having to create work or plans that you know might be aborted. I think you're in this situation, you know, from a pure business point of view, when you need staff and specialists to be able to develop work, but also we have the furlough scheme here, and we're about to go into the furlough scheme again, whereby you're effectively deciding which members of the team are, inverted commas, dispensable during this period, and which members of the team you need to retain to deliver the first two phases.
Yeah.
And that's tough because you're trying to keep the staff morale up, and we're also doing a restructure because we have had to reduce cost base as well, not being able to retain all staff. So having a team which are fully focused on what is an incredibly difficult strategy while being in a period of turbulence is difficult.
There's a question just come in, which is there anything that you found out that made you change what you were doing or how you were speaking to customers? And I wonder actually if I can extend this to say, how else have you been, and what have you been hearing from your audiences as you've been listening through this?
Well, I think in a way there's that element of reassurance that we are incredibly valued. I think one thing is our value to the city and the people around us is a lot to do with being open. Sometimes we can get overly grandiose about what our civic purpose is, but for our particular building, we are perceived as being, I think one person described it as like the groundhog on Groundhog Day. If home's open, then the city's open. And culture being open is an incredibly important thing. I think on a more granular learning level, Melissa John, who, if anyone has seen the television program Life, which is on BBC One, is an actor who's in that, was on our panel, and she's the representative from Triple C, and she said something really clear, that everything we're learning about disability and access during a pandemic are the questions we should have been asking anyway, but haven't been. So in terms of how we make our venue accessible online to audiences, because a lot of the time we're thinking about people who are shielding as people who are somehow needing extra care and attention, just because that has increased significantly in comparison to what it is before. There's 10% of our population are deaf and disabled in the city, and we need to continue to give that level of thought and attention in everything we do.
So on that strain, are there learnings from these phases or even some of what you're articulating there that you as an organization will keep in a post-pandemic world, whenever that might be?
Yeah, I think so. I think that firstly, it's worth saying we don't know what a post-pandemic world will look like. And I think obviously, Shirley, you'll know far more about this than I, but it's what do we go back to? You know, I was saying the other day, are people always going to be wearing masks on public transport forever? Or is there a generation that won't remember what that was before, like me remembering smoking on trains? It's just people won't remember that. And I think that the discussing what the purpose of digital is in the context of art has been quite a revealing thing, because we've been doing it out of desperation. And I think that the next phase that we've got to work out is something like Homemakers feels like it's an alternative. And I think that we will continue to invest in creation and distribution of art online, not as something which is just there because, you know, it's an Arts Council box or we've got nothing else to do, but something that is serving an audience and reaching a group of people we've not been able to before. So I think that's an important one.
I'm curious, John, because the listening that you did included so many different constituents. One of the things that arts organizations have seen now, because of the different distribution channels, are a more diverse and younger audience participating now. Was there something different? Did you learn, new audiences, different audiences really do require something different from our most loyal audience. Did you learn something from the new?
Sure, I think I sort of learned something almost converse, is that a lot of the time the environment that people enjoy here is because of the diversity and the complexity of the groups of people, and the fact that we exist as the place where everyone can come together. And I think somebody said home is one of the few places in the city where this group of people who were sat around the Home Soon panel would all feel equally as comfortable as each other. And there's an element of joy in that. I think one of the problems that we did have is something that was actually said by Eileen, is that the people who most desperately want to and need to come back to home are the people who are most afraid to. This is when we were open. So this is something that focused our heads so much, is that what we were doing is, if we were saying that there's two types of people who will come back to home, you know, one which are the people who are who just feel fine, they're comfortable to do it, and two are the people who are, you know, are able to and will do it with additional cleaning measures and things like that. There's an entire group of people who the thing they want to do most is sit in our cafe and have a coffee and go to see a film, that they can't. And in amongst that, when we're talking to everyone who's coming to our venues or is being engaged in it and asking them why they are, this entire group of people could get left behind. And that stuck with me somewhere.
Yeah, boy. Yeah. Okay. That's going to stick with me too. Stephen, I'm going to just wrap us up with a couple of final thoughts about what's coming on TRG 30. Jon, hang with us, because I'm going to give the mic back to you here in a minute. TRG 30, in between now and the end of the year, we're going to be talking about relationship priorities. So this point about the people who can't get back, who want to, Jon, next week it's what are we going to do about managing relationships over the next 6 to 12 months? How do we sort, prioritize, and invest in the right ways to ensure that we're both connecting with those loyalists and the new parts of our community that might be less familiar with us, but are talking to us today. After that, we're going to be talking about creative resiliency, building on the conversation that I had with Rahav Harfouche and Michael Mattis, more about successes in the US and Scotland, and then special guests as we wrap up and head toward the end of 2020. As always, a soundbite from our data corner. Looking at the North American benchmark, we have a little bit of positivity to report here. October sales were better than June, July, and August combined. It represents a 65% increase since August. Of course, sales are pacing well below 2019, but the last 2 months are showing some progress. And at TRG, we are here. We will be here with you every week, and we hope in a variety of ways that we'll meet you where you are in your city, your region, with your art form, as your partner in creative resiliency in arts and culture around the globe. Jon, I want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us this phased approach that you can phase backwards and forwards into and out of, that includes really listening and learning. This is one of the big muscles that I think our sector must strengthen as we go into the next year and beyond, is listening. I always give our guests the opportunity to close us out with some bit of positive sort of fuel for our listeners. I want to give you the mic and give you a chance to do that.
I think that what we've shared today is replicable, but also within so many organizations across the world, I'm seeing things that I'm incredibly envious of. And I think as a sector, we're creative, naturally creative. And I think no one is better suited to respond to the pandemic than the people I've met. And it's been a privilege to be here today and share some of this nonsense. And you know, I'm sure please get in touch. I probably regret saying that now, but I'm happy to share any of this if it might even be remotely useful, because I think now more than ever, everyone needs to be in it together. And finally, I'm just gutted. I was meant to have a haircut tomorrow, and that's been cancelled as well. So another 6 months of this.
Oh, I know. There's nothing worse than looking at yourself on a Zoom screen. Jon, you look great. You sound even better. And I cannot wait to get back to Manchester. Stephen, you and I will go together, share a pint at the restaurant there, see a film. We look forward to it. In the meantime, thank you for the welcome home, the home soon, and home from home metaphors. Stephen, always thank you. And everyone, thanks for sharing 30 minutes with us this week. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.